Welcome to the Titan Protection Show. We have got an exciting one today. We are doing something a little bit unique. We've been talking drones for quite some time, and I think it's a little bit different to see it in action. So that's what we're doing today. We are going to put a drone up in the air and kind of walk through some of the benefits of autonomous response and patrol, or ARP as we call it for drones and security. So excited to get started. I am Ryan Smith, president, founder of Titan Protection. Got a great crew here with us today. Tom Carey over here, our remote operations manager. Welcome, Tom. Appreciate you coming on. Tom, you manage all aspects of flight operations, pilot training, waivers, FAA regulations, all of the above. Full-time job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, and your background too, you came to us from the police department where you were flying drones and doing drone as a first responder. So this is not new to you, but we are certainly blazing the trail here from the security aspect, drone-wise.
Right, we are. We're out in front. Nobody else is doing what we're doing in terms of having a nationwide beyond visual line of sight waiver. We're set up where we can park one of these drone-in-a-box solutions.
Yeah.
Just about anywhere and be up and running rather quickly.
Well, and we'll dig into that more. You know, I've been following drones and security for some time. I started as a security officer when I was 18 and started flying single-engine piston airplanes when I was 14. So being able to put these things together professionally has been exciting. But the two things we've been watching and we needed were the beyond visual line of sight regulations and docking stations to fly drones. We're going to talk a lot about that in more detail, but you touched a little bit on our nationwide beyond visual line of sight waiver, which allows us to operate these things and scale this nationwide. One of the barriers we had early on was you could get a waiver, but you just had to go to each site, put out the put the paperwork together and all of that. So we'll get into more detail on that. I also want to welcome Chuck Pattinson, our sales manager, and Sean Burns, our Director of Technology. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, you have been heavily involved in the technology side of things, and Chuck, you manage kind of our mobile security side. You've grown that business to over 1,000 mobile units out in the field. I bring that up only because this is a very similar application. We're talking about protecting outdoor assets using the drone. We think the drone does two things primarily. It's either patrolling, looking for something to happen, or it's responding to a triggering event, autonomous, automated response and patrol. But you've lived in that world for a while, so understand the customer. What kinds of applications, what types of environments are you seeing a lot of demand for on the drone side?
It's really all over, though, still. I mean, a lot of bigger size footprint properties where it's hard for a security guard or hard for cameras to see everything all at once. A big investment in cameras to cover all the corners of a big property. That's what we're hearing a lot of. But there's really, I mean, even smaller size places where they say our current solution's not working.
Great.
Yeah. So the drone as a service model is just one more layer in our security program. Dealing with the cameras and the terrestrial based, we still have some obstacles, right? Terrain, visual lines of sight, the ability to get from point A to point B. So we typically build like really strong perimeters. What the drone gives us is that capability to take a camera, fly it in the air, and we don't have any obstacles in the way. We can fly over things. We can fly around things. It gives us that next level view that really nobody else can do right now when you're looking at the drone as a service model.
You can also follow people. You can see a vantage point where you're up 50 feet in the air. Think about what you can see around the subject on the ground. They're not fixed, right, like cameras are. So, again, you can follow. You can get to areas that are tougher to see, especially where you have a big footprint.
Yeah, we are going to jump into all of that, and I am monitoring the chat here. We've got some good questions already. One, who actually monitors the drone feed and responds to alerts? That's a fantastic question. We're going to get to a lot of this stuff, and I think, and we'll answer some questions at the end. Feel free to interact, throw some questions in the chat. We will get to that. Some of the bigger items that I know always come up, endurance, weather restrictions, those types of things. But another one that security professionals are asking about is how does this integrate into our current security ecosystem, and what are the ROI? What does it cost? How does that go? So we're going to explain that in detail. And we'll get into the pricing model and give some examples and kind of show how this works. I think we're going to start off first here with just going through some of the features and benefits. We're going to get the drone up in the air. We're going to show off some of that stuff. As we are talking about this, I'd love to hear some feedback in the comments. What do you think something like this would cost? A service like this for the drone, for the piloting, for the monitoring of it. Love to hear some feedback on that, and we're certainly going to answer those questions here at the end, and we'll circle back to anything we haven't answered. We're also giving away a couple prizes here. We will be picking that at the end. We have a couple drones to give away, one being a DJI Mini 4, which is an awesome drone and exciting. So we'll announce that towards the end. So hang tight for that. I think we are ready to roll. Please do, like I said, comment. We are going to start off here. We have a really good and short video that we have put together that kind of shows the full ecosystem, how the drone flies, interacting with a criminal on the property, the guard response. It's a very short video, and then we're going to get a drone actually up in the air and break down some of these features and benefits in real-time live action. So let's take a peek at that video, and then we'll jump right into it.
I like this video.
By the car. Security has been dispatched. Identify yourself.
All right. That's a good overarching video of how the whole thing works. We covered a lot of things there. Audio talk down, thermal, night capabilities, the response, how does it integrate, the spotlight,
Analytics.
all of that. So we are going to go through that in a little bit more detail here, and we are going to get a drone up in the air, and we are going to kind of walk through some of these features. So I know first of all, we are going to kind of start at the dock. How are we doing? We about ready to get that thing up in the air?
I'm ready to roll.
We might start with just kind of showing the dock. One of the big things, we talked a little bit about the beyond visual line of sight regulation. Right now, it's you have to have a pilot in visual line of sight of the drone while it's operating, and that presents a challenge for us from a security standpoint. Is how do we remove the pilot from the ground, and that's where the beyond visual line of sight comes, our waiver regulations and those types of things. Beyond that, we need a dock, and so if we might take a peek at our docking station here, and we're currently looking at a drone and dock that's deployed on a corporate campus. Several buildings, lots of different acres. One of the challenges they had here was just the size of the property. How do you get camera coverage? And some people have talked about the drone as the flying camera. But one of the things I wanted to note here while we're looking at it, we've got a speaker and a spotlight that's on this drone. We fly a lot of different drones. We like Nightingale, we like Sunflower Labs, Skydio. This is a DJI Dock 2, and the audio piece is something that's just really powerful. We run into this in our mobile units. It's something that works very well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to talk down to a subject on site through a loudspeaker, number one, it startles them. They don't know it's supposed to be there. Two, it's loud. And three, we're picking them out by what they wear typically so that they know they're being watched. They know they're being recorded.
Right.
And 90 to 95% of the time, that's enough to run them off.
They've done some studies on that too, where it's been, the drone or not the drone, what deters people from criminal activity. And it's not, they've looked at increased prison sentences and all sorts of stuff. And the highest deterrent was the threat of being caught in the act. And so that's where the audio, this isn't a pre-recorded message. We're calling you out by your clothing. Hey, you in the blue shirt, leave immediately. Police are on the scene. Very important when we talk about remote guarding, because you still have a last mile. How do you respond to what you're seeing? You don't want the camera just recording. You want the person behind it. That's the what we provide, in remote camera monitoring and drone piloting. But then the response piece and the audio talk down is big. So
and there's a psychological aspect, I think, to the drone as well. The
100%.
drone, the knowing that it can follow you, that it's not just a fixed camera. You can go around the corner. And I saw that in my previous life, as you put it, where there was a situation where a guy was on the roof and I was able to put the drone, right above him, so everybody knew exactly where he was.
Yeah.
He wasn't sneaking up on anybody.
Well, and it sounds like a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's loud when it's
Yeah.
over there and
Yeah,
on that piece.
from a technology standpoint, the cameras have done a really good job of seeing really far distances. Obviously, they can't see through things. There's no doubt about it when a drone is flying 50 feet above your head that they are talking to you. It's not you guy off there on the distance. It's right there. It's flashing lights. It's got lights on you, and it's saying you in the blue shirt or you in the black shirt, you need to leave. So that adds that next layer of the hornet's nest right above your head to Ryan's point.
And another thing, in that video, the dispatcher on the drone called the local police or the officer on site. Not everybody has an officer on site to call, so the talk down is got to be powerful, and it is. I mean, police, departments around the country have fewer officers than they did a decade ago. Getting somebody out there after they prioritize, violent crimes and other things ahead of trespass. So the audio talk down's big. It's important. It's got to work, and it does.
Well, and let's get this puppy up in the air and kind of show some of this stuff off. And we've got a great question. James Wolf asks, is the video clear enough to see car tags clearly? And that's one of the things that we're going to show off here first is kind of the zoom capability of the drone. So if we're ready to roll, let's put her up in the air.
We are.
All right.
So when we're launching one of these drones, so we do have to have a pilot that initiates the flight, and they will select launch. Prior to that, they're checking for weather at that site. You can actually see, you've probably noticed already on the top of the dock, there's a little weather station, tells us the wind speed, and then tells us if it's raining and the temperature to make sure we're within the safe operating for the drone. Like this drone here can take off and land in 18-mile-per-hour winds, and then can operate in up to 26-mile-per-hour winds.
And wind and weather resistance is something I want to talk a little bit more on kind of towards the end, but really want to address, how long can the thing fly, what types of weather. We put out a white paper that kind of shows the different wind map across the United States to show how often could a drone fly in windy conditions. And nationwide, long story short, it's about 93% of the time, but we've got some good information on that. So as we're flying along here, we are going to have the drone, and one of the things we want to show first is the zoom capability. So there we've zoomed in, and we've got, and I should mention also that we have placed bad guys around the property to kind of simulate some of the things that we're doing here. So we wanted to show a couple of these things. And there we're getting dialed in. And so to that point about the license plate, yes, there's a 40-time optical zoom on this drone, which is pretty powerful. And Tom, we'll give a second here. This is a QR code that does have some information about our services, so feel free to shoot that. But just wanted to show how well the drone zooms in, and we'll give that a second or so people can use that QR code if they want to. But if you don't mind after that, zooming back out just so we can show, there we go, how far away we are and how close into the detail that that drone could get. So that optical zoom being a big, and Sean, you might explain a little bit difference between digital and optical zoom.
Yeah, so if you go back in time, you think about how cameras zoom in, it's actually changing the aperture and being able to focus in like an old camera focusing way off versus a digital zoom, which just increases the number of pixels within the screen to get a better picture. So that is an old school version of a 40X improvement. So to the question of, can you read license plates? Yeah. And the drone can move, right? If you can't get close to it, then you move the drone closer and you zoom in. So it's not a fixed camera system anymore.
And we had a great question in here. Somebody asked, they're close to a downtown airport. Does that prevent from flying? So our nationwide waiver does get us about 90% of the coverage. There are a couple restrictions, airports being one of them, but traditionally and honestly within controlled airspace, it's a little bit easier to operate the drone in. You may run into some issues if you're within a mile of an airport, that close into it, if it's controlled or uncontrolled. There's a few nuances, but for most of the time, And for that one in particular, being close to an airport necessarily isn't an issue.
Not necessarily, no. And then us already having our BV loss waiver, we can actually file for an extended waiver within restricted airspace to be able to operate.
Right.
Yeah, and when we were going through the FAA process of trying to get our licensing to do this, they really liked our model. They liked the fact that we were going to be in a closed environment. We weren't flying over parks and other areas like that. So I believe that was one of the leading, or if not a leading, reason why we were able to get that first BV loss waiver to fly anywhere in the United States, because of the very strict rules we were setting. I mean, we're flying 50 feet above the ground. If you have an airplane flying 50 feet above the ground, you got a lot more to worry about than a drone being in your airspace.
The drone's not going to be the problem.
No, it's a good point. They're very much, the FAA is very favorable to our application since we're pretty much close to the properties we're protecting. The challenge becomes the delivery, the folks that are DFR sometimes when they're flying over, large areas, people, that type of thing is a whole different challenge. But ours is a little bit different.
Yep.
So. Well, one of the things too we wanted to highlight the thermal capability, and it's 11 a.m. here Central Time, so it's sunny outside and a little bit tougher to show off some of the thermal. So we've got a couple clips here to show of the thermal capability, which is extremely impressive and helpful. We'll show that now and kind of talk through. There's low light, and then there's also thermal, and we'll kind of be switching back and forth between a couple of these. But obviously, then. We're patrolling an area like this. This is this property at night. You can see in the dark, there's some areas that without a thermal camera would be very challenging to know if a person is there.
Yeah,
the other thing I wanted to highlight there, we missed it, but it was that you could see the footprints in the snow there if you look closely.
Yeah, so this was filmed during the winter, and it really shows the thermal capabilities because everything is cold, but you can actually see the footprints in the snow on that original one, and there was a circle in the middle of that area, and we were like, what is that circle? Well, it was a manhole cover, and it was obviously warmer than the surrounding area. So pretty cool thermal abilities, especially in very cold environments.
Yes, and that's also showing off the low light capability. So you see a little bit of that even without the thermal, some of the picture quality. This is now patrolling over an area. That wooded area to the left of the screen is an area where they have had challenges with homeless people making camps, living in the area, produces all sorts of problems around the property, but that's one of the uses for that. And also kind of a very challenging area. They wouldn't be able to put a camera there. How often can a person patrol there? One of the things that has come up with security integrators specifically is how does this integrate into our security ecosystem? We'll talk a little bit more about that, but the thing I wanted to mention was there's on-site officers at this location that work in the lobby, right, that are managing access control, so they're able to see the stream of the video of the drone while it's flying around and get the patrols of those areas without having to leave that site unmanned, and we'll talk a little bit more about that going through here. One of the other things that comes up and one of the big benefits of the drone is speed of response. It can deploy very quickly, even if you have an on-site security officer. How quickly can they get to an area? So now I want to kind of show off the speed of the drone and kind of show how quickly it can get across a property. If we're ready to show that, I think we're still up in the air. But Tom, if you don't mind kind of highlighting, maybe walk us through how far it's traveling, how fast. I know we throttle this a little bit because our waiver only allows us to fly 33 miles an hour.
33.55 miles per hour.
Okay. And the drone can actually fly much faster than that, but our waiver
physically
dictates
capable,
that.
yeah.
Right. So we will show that now, and just kind of want to give you a feel for how quickly the drone can respond to an incident or a need over the property. So Tom, I'll let you take it away here, but you might kind of give us a show or walk us through how far that is traveling.
So, yeah, from the start point to the end point here on the north end of the property is about 300 meters, and we're getting up to almost 30 miles per hour, right at 30 miles per hour as we approach our end point here. As you can see, that's 300 meters. As the crow flies, as they say, you're not having to dodge traffic, navigate traffic laws. It's just flying straight over everything, and it's there in a few seconds.
Yeah.
So if And that works too. If we're on an automated patrol and a response situation comes up, either from an intrusion detection or an officer or a call from the customer, we can switch gears from the patrol and hightail it over to that spot in just a matter of seconds.
Yeah. Very impressive. So that's a big one. I think that comes up a lot in sales discussions too, Chuck. I mean, is that a question people want to know, response wise, how quickly can that thing get moving and cover a property? Of
course, if it's a big footprint property, you have a breach in your perimeter way off on the other side. How quickly you can get over there is important, because that person breaches, gets on the property, and if you're not there quick, they're gone, or they're already, outside of a camera view, and they're probably doing something that they shouldn't be. So getting out there quick is important.
And when you're talking about those giant properties, even if you have an on-site officer, right, they have to worry about getting from point A to point B. The drone gets there, it starts watching them, and it can continue to keep eyes on the entire time. And it's very simple for the on-site officer to kind of get an idea, because the drone's going to be flying above the suspect, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then the officer can respond. So if you have a patrol, in Kansas City, let's say you're using the Titan patrol team, we're going to dispatch our patrol units over there. They're going to get out. They're going to know right where to go, because they got to look for the drone flying, and it's going to be right above them, along with a radio contract, and be like, hey, it's a guy wearing a blue shirt. Do you see the white truck? Yeah, they got out of that, and they jumped the fence, and now they're inside the property. Much, much faster, much, much simpler to get that deployed
than guessing.
Yep.
Well, great. Next up is my personal favorite, is the audio talk down, and I think that's one that it's just such a powerful deterrent, but being able to add that now and have that on the drone has been a game changer. So love to highlight that. Tom, I think we have a bad guy set up, and kind of a typical issue, or one of the issues that they have at this property is dumpster diving, and it's very challenging to run a camera to this location. It's very challenging. Then I think the audio piece. So we'll kind of show that in action and show how that piece works. So there is our bad guy in the dumpster.
In clear violation of the no trespassing sign.
Right, just couldn't care less. But
you see what a camera would see right there, flat, straight on view. Now watch what the drone can see because of the height and the vantage point it has.
And part of the FAA rules is we do have to put signage up that says this is a drone-controlled space, and you're going to be on drone property. So that's part of our solution, is also allowing people to know, hey, you're going to see drones flying around here. Pay attention.
Let me hear from the audio.
This is a Titan protection to the person in the black shirt near the dumpster. You are trespassing. Officers have been dispatched.
So very loud. I actually, it's obviously you're not going to mistake that. I can calling out the person's clothing. They know it's not recorded. It goes back to that piece of the threat of being caught in the act.
And
now,
I think it's good to note that that is text to speech, so our pilots can input it right there based on what they're seeing. This is not a pre-recorded. This is,
and that's an aftermarket piece on the Dock 2. The Dock 3 you can actually talk through voice-wise,
right,
live through the microphone. But as you can hear, it's loud, it's powerful. We have instructed the bad guy to disregard it and not to run away or engage, because we kind of want to show the other aspect of this, which is how do we integrate this with the security team that's on the ground. And one of the things that we can do is we can share that footage through a link to where we can share it with responding officers, whether that be the police department, whether it be the security force that's there. The other aspect too is folks want to know, well, how does this interact with my camera ecosystem? And so we're able to take an RTSP stream, pipe that into your normal video management, and it would intake that as a normal camera system, so you can review footage, record it. Am I off on that, Sean?
No, it's the simple RTSP, real-time streaming protocols that the cameras send out. So if your your people can accept those as a video stream, then they can actually be able to see those and keep it as a recorded clip, and then use it as evidence if something really needs to be there. So really straightforward technology.
Yeah.
The sharing is super simple too. It is literally select a link, share, email, text. It can be a QR code.
Well, and back to the example of the security officers here, I mean, that's how they can use that, where you can see from kind of the vantage of the drone that this is a large property. So if the officer that's in the lobby that's checking people in and out needs to leave to do a foot patrol, which is how they traditionally did it, then they've left that post unmanned. You know, what do they do with that? Now they can do the patrol and follow along with it, know that everything's okay, continue with their job, or respond to something like this, which we're going to show next, is how do we share this with the security officer that's on the ground and kind of show how they can see the footage and respond to this same dumpster diving incident.
Yeah, and I think
we're ready to show that
goes right in with that ROI, right?
Mm-hmm.
The man in the middle's got to be there. We got to have that, because we've learned since 2014 being in the video monitoring arena, some people just don't care, right? Like, I know I'm going to be on video and I don't care. I got my face covered. I'm going to do this other stuff. How do we get the human involved at that point? And maybe you have a roving patrol. Maybe you don't need a roving patrol right now, because we have a drone that's flying and doing the patrols, watching what's doing there, so you can eliminate that cost, and then maybe have one on site who can then go out and jump in the car, go follow where the drone's at, and meet the bad guy at that location. So there's ways to build that layer approach of security, which all of us look for that, the layers of security. One solution doesn't fit every environment.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to cut back to the dumpster diver, and we're going to kind of show this. We're simulating here that we've done the audio talk down. That person disregarded it, just went back to doing what they're doing. So now we're going to the next layer, which is we're showing the footage so the responding officer knows what they're dealing with, and then they're responding to the scene. So here we have on a tablet, we've been able to share the drone feed to Captain Voss here.
Yep, looking at that RTSP stream right there, just right to the officer.
Running out, and he is then responding to the area. So at this point now, he has some a lot more information. He has eyes on what's going on. I think there's this officer safety factor to that, to where, even if there's other officers that are responding to back him up, they can kind of keep up to speed with what's going on and know whether they need to escalate or de-escalate a situation. And then he's also got Overwatch while he is there dealing with his subject by himself. He's got eyes behind him that know and can communicate what's going on. So there's certainly an additional safety lever, layer that's there as well.
Yeah, and document it.
Right.
You got to have all this on video, the interaction he's going to have with the subject on the ground.
Yeah, the forensics from 50 feet up gives you a completely different area, even better, almost I would say better than body cam, because body cam gives you that interaction, but definitely gives you that next level of what's going on around the environment.
Right. And then, like you said, it's the documentation. So somebody tries to say someone did something, it's like you got a drone 25, 30, 40 feet above you saying otherwise.
Well, there you go. That's the full kind of how you implement all that together. Captain Voss looking amazing. Only way to defeat him is with meat or protein of some sort. But no, he looks great. And again, I think that Overwatch factor of being able to have the drone there also may be a deterrent to him on the ground, of knowing, hey, there's people watching me, or how, you add that safety feature, but also the officer is going to feel a lot more comfortable that he has eyes on him and protection. And,
right.
Think escorts to, just employees leaving the building, having somebody that can have eyes on them while they're walking in and out. There's just a ton of opportunities here.
You see the red and the green lights on the drone itself. So at night, those are going to be a lot more visible than you can see on that little clip.
Yeah.
People are going to see that, and they're going to be deterred from that alone in some cases.
Yeah. It adds that, at the 5 o'clock when people are going out, send the drone out, just have them looking around just have eyes in the sky looking around for anybody suspicious, because we see that, with the escort, like you say, who's looking fishy here. That's the human element that can be done ad hoc. It doesn't even have to be part of a routine patrol, where we actually have one of our licensed pilots say at 5 o'clock at this location, we need you to launch a drone and just sit up there and look around, physically look for stuff that's going on for that 1 hour,
right?
From 5 to 6 p.m.
Yeah. All right. Are we showing the landing? Okay, so we've got a camera down there, and just showing the camera, or the the drone landing back in the dock, just to kind of round things out here and showing after the patrol, the drone will land and then obviously recharge and be ready for deployment. So I think we will film and show that piece whenever y'all are ready.
Ready.
And Tom, the charging time, flight times.
Yeah, so these are good for a good 25 to 30 minutes of flight time. Charging is about 1-to-1 right now, so for each minute it's in the air, it takes about a minute to charge.
And that drone can actually fly for 45, some I think even the 4. But the challenge is if you exhaust it, if you have to redeploy, say we get an alert from the camera or something else, if you're at 0, you're waiting until that can charge back up. And so we've had some customer, I think we've had some discussions about 2 drones, or we've had some that want to have a drone in the air consistently and just have it flying around and then swap out and patrol. So there's some different ways to do that.
And the landing and taking off, the DJI recommends that be done through the machine itself. It's got auto landing and auto takeoff. So our pilots don't even, they're sitting there watching it, making sure it doesn't, have a problem. But you saw how smooth that was. That was completely autonomous. Tom wasn't controlling that. It's much more difficult, actually, to land in such a very small spot using line of sight.
Yes, it is.
And that's a great point, and I think that'll kind of bring us into the pricing discussion of, like, the services, how we package this, how we price it. Like our camera monitoring business, we're the eyes behind the camera. You don't want the camera just recording the crime happening. Our value is that we can interact with it in real time, and that's what we do with the drones as well. But then we also fill that regulatory function of right now you have to have a pilot. When we talk about automated response and patrol, yes, we are watching that. The pilot can take control. Say they're doing an automated mission. They're watching it, making sure everything goes okay. They can take over if there's a loss of link or a GPS loss or something goes wrong, or maybe they see something of interest and they need to fly the drone over and investigate a little bit more.
And I think it's worth noting, too, that these are FAA Part 107 certified pilots. It's not just somebody who's been playing around with their toy drone they got off Amazon. These are people who have studied, taken the test, and learned all the...
And that test is not easy.
No,
I can tell you. I mean, I have a pilot's license, and I would say the written test on that is it's not easy. It's a challenging test.
Yes, it was. It is.
Yeah, and there's we could have a whole nother show on Part 108 and beyond visual line of sight and everything else that's happening. Those regulations are constantly changing. But one of the things, on top of being the eyes behind the drone or the human in the loop, as we call it, the piloting, everything else. The drone thing can be somewhat overwhelming when you start to peel back the layers, the pricing, the when can it fly. Before we jump into the pricing, I just wanted to address finally some of the wind and weather issues. We talked about flight endurance, how far, how long it can fly. What are some other things that come into play from endurance? We talked a little bit about the wind. We have some resources for that. If you're interested in your state or your area, how often can the drone fly because of wind? But rain comes up a lot. Can we fly in rain?
We can fly in light rain and even some light snow and freezing rain with the newer ones, with the way the propellers are designed. But these devices are very safety conscious in the way they're built themselves, where they will notify us if we are pushing it outside of those parameters.
And the dock 2, we can fly in light rain. Dock 3 actually has some heated propellers to where you can fly in even freezing conditions. Because the problem is if you fly in rain and freezing conditions, then you get ice on the propellers, you lose lift. That can be a problem. Dock 3 is also kind of sloped to the roof of the dock so that ice can fall off of it, and some different weather conditions helping for that.
Right, and they have their own HVAC systems in terms of being heated and cooled to make sure all the devices are maintaining appropriate temperature levels to work at their best.
Yeah, so if you're in a real hot climate, it's cooling off the drone.
It has air conditioning inside the drone. And
then it heats it so if the snow, ice doesn't gather on top of it.
I'm going to jump into a couple questions from the chat here, and then I think we'll go into a little bit of detail about the pricing, how that works, because I think that's probably top of mind for folks is what does this cost and how does it work?
Yeah. we talked about use case and the layered approach of security. We also talked. I think we failed to mention that there are other opportunities, even on a smaller footprint, when you're looking in the downtown areas, where you don't. Titan's known for its solar autonomous cameras dropped off anywhere, anytime, because we run off of solar power. Well, sometimes you can't get solar, so and you don't have really clean lines of sight. And we've seen this a lot in very urban areas where they're stacking everything along those fence lines that they can possibly stack, because maybe they have 30 feet from the sidewalk to the building, and the building could be a 30-foot skyscraper, right? So you have terrible lines of sight. You can be up 18, 20 feet, and they're going to have trucks, they're going to have bricks, they're going to have everything along that border so that they can work in there. I mean, it's a little bit of a maze. A drone takes that element out because it flies above the fray, right? It can look down between things now, which any camera put on a pole would have to be a really, really, really tall pole to see over a 53-foot trailer, right? Drones can fly right down there and look down between those. So it adds a whole new level of construction security, because now we have a better view of what's happening between devices instead of those being a solid blocker.
You could see all that if you had 100 cameras, but the drone's just one. You can see all of it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Couple questions here. One, would staff be instantly notified if there was an issue happening in real time? That's a fantastic question, because not only can we share that with responding officers, but we can share it for, we had one here, we had one at this location where there were some protests going on that weren't related to this property, but they were around it, and some of the executives wanted to be able to kind of monitor things, so we were able to share that. So the answer is yes. We kind of, especially when we get into the overnight hours, we operate off the fire, flood, or blood method of, if any of those things exist, we're getting people on the phone from the client side. Otherwise, we're kind of addressing it and updating them in the morning. But being able to share the feed can be through text, email, pretty simple to do.
Really easy to do. Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here. How does it work for large campuses with multiple buildings? Not much different. I mean, this scenario we're talking about here is that same thing, and we're even across the street. To fly over people, you have to have a parachute equipped on your drone. We have some different options, but we are able to fly over the street to across the campus over there. And so big property certainly is something where it shines, but it doesn't have to be a big property to do that.
Well, and we also currently have a group of auto dealers. It's about 11, 12 buildings altogether.
Chuck, what is the linear?
The perimeter is 1.2 miles. So they're concerned about people breaching that.
And how many buildings is that?
It's 11 or 12 dealership buildings.
So I think
and I want to talk about that
direct
one in a little bit more detail when we kind of go through the pricing point, because I think that's a really good example when we start to talk about how big the property is. There's some great questions in here. I just want to make sure we get to another one. Does it push footage to the NVR live or once it lands back on the dock? It'll do it from the dock once it lands, because then the drone downloads the footage to the dock, and the dock RTSP through, but live view can go live.
Right. That's
the RTSP stream.
Yeah. Yes, we can do it live.
So recorded footage, and this one is a great question too, but it says, just to make sure I heard correctly, but does the integration with video management system work layered with companies' existing access control and video management? Yes, that's where we're saying we take that RTSP stream, we pipe that into their server, their video management system, and it's recording and inputting that just like a normal camera stream would.
Yeah, so there's always challenges, right? Not everything plays well with each other. Some closed loop systems won't allow anybody's other RSTP streams. So depending on your VMS, you may or may not have problems. The more open the architecture, the access, the visualons, some of those will probably pretty straight integration. Some of your more niche ones may not, because they want their own stuff.
And then the software that we use to manage our flights and our missions and all that has a few that it's already worked out some of those integration bugs and will naturally link to.
Correct. So then you get into the SMTP notifications and how does that go through an alerting system, and that gets really into the weeds. But yeah, not everything works with everything. That's just the world of IT. But on the basics, if you can accept a standard video stream, then we can get it somewhere in there. What you all do with it is a different question.
And most things can be worked out.
Yeah.
I've got two here, and one leads us into the pricing. So I think that's a great transition there. But another question was asking, can the drone listen? Technically, you'd have to have a microphone on it. I don't believe we have that. And technically, we've stayed away from that because sometimes I know legally, one person in the conversation has to be aware of it, at least in Kansas. So we run into some privacy issues of, are we listening into conversations where we're not a part of, or type of thing. So we've run into that with camera monitoring in general, where we go audio out. And I know there's plenty of cameras and capability to take it in. We have not done that. Privacy is another big topic that I don't think we've dived into greatly, but I think it's something that we, are certainly conscious of and talk a lot about, is these drones have great zoom capabilities. And so we focus a lot in the training aspect of, making sure that we are keeping our eyes on the property that we're paid to protect. And I think it's a big responsibility for us as an industry, because this is so new that we're setting the table for future types of things. Sunflower Labs, they have a very great, you geofence the property. Anything that's outside of that geofence is blurred. And so there's no opportunity to record or take any of those things. So there's some really interesting things that are being done to address some of those issues as well. Transitioning into the pricing scenario, and one of the questions that came here is, if a drone was in operation for the client and it gets damaged, what happens? So that's a great segue into kind of how we position this. Is we do this as a service, to where we provide the regulations, the pilots, the insurance, everything is one price. There's no upfront costs. It's a monthly fee that brings all of this in. And so just to kind of talk about, and Chuck, I might get your opinion. I want to talk about that specific car dealership that we were talking about. That's one of our recent deployments that I think is a very interesting one. We're getting a lot of demand out of data centers, car dealerships, construction sites, kind of typical outdoor assets. But let's just say a typical system, eight patrols, what is that going to cost a customer per month? And are there any other costs that would be on top of that, or anything that's not included? And kind of address that. Say that customer says, well, what happens if it gets damaged? What is a typical price that a customer could expect for something like that?
Yeah, what you described, probably between $4,500 and $7,000. It depends on how big that perimeter is going to be. But
I mean just the 8 patrol piece. So if somebody just says, out of the automated response and patrol, they just want 8 patrols in the system, what does that charge?
Just patrolling is going to be less, closer to that $4,500 to $5,000, $6,000.
I was going to say 45, right under 5, which is, for everything included, I think is a pretty interesting price, especially when you talk about a guard. So if you put that out there on a property, and that may be $10,000, $14,000 for having somebody out there in the overnight hours, that's a pretty powerful ROI, and especially completely turnkey.
Yeah, I mean, you said what's all included, right? It's all the background work that we've had to do to get the licensing, includes the installation, the maintenance. If you think about these drones flying every quarter, you're going to have to go out and make sure the propellers if they've flown a certain number of hours, they have to be replaced. Our point is to provide this as a service and make it a monthly cost. No upfront part. You mentioned that earlier, Ryan. I was talking to somebody the other day that said, that's going to be the monthly price for my situation. And I said, yeah. How much is it going to be upfront? Is there a big one-time upfront piece? And I said, no. We want to make this simple. We want to make it streamlined and include everything. So you, again, have one monthly price, and we're providing the service the way we've described.
Yeah. And then let's talk a little bit about that specific application. Tell us about that car dealership. What was their challenge? What did we put in place? And what was what was the cost of that system to the customer?
Yeah, the biggest thing they had were just theft of cars, and they could be coming in anywhere, several different places. They saw fence lines being cut, people coming in from, again, it's 1.2 miles around there, so lots of area to cover. You couldn't do it with one guard, which is what they had at the time. People are cutting fence, they're getting in cars and driving 3, 4, 5 more of them off at a time, and it was happening repeatedly across these 11. I think there's 6 or 7 distinct dealerships, but they had multiple buildings. So the drone, obviously we've set up the perimeter so that we would know when the breach happened over in, grid A4. We'd know exactly where that happened. We dispatch the drone, flies over the buildings, gets right over there and has eyes on the subject. And then they wanted to partner, or they wanted to couple that with an on-site guard who we could then dispatch that would be on site at the time. And obviously you wouldn't have to wait for the local police department to get there. So immediate response to the perimeter intrusion, and then notifying a guard to get over there. Here's what we're looking at, and he's over there in, less than a minute. And so that whole solution, including the perimeter detection piece and the patrols, they have a number of daily patrols. They want this up in the air, people to see it, hopefully also to deter other ones that might be casing the property or thinking about coming back later. All of that was about $7,100 a month.
That's why. I mean, and I think you may have said that was 7 car dealerships together.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big, property. But then to provide the detection, that includes the detection equipment, the drone, the piloting, the monitoring, everything.
The installation,
7,100, but the installation,
the
everything.
maintenance.
Right.
We're going to come out quarterly for every installation. Every customer, we're going to come out quarterly to make sure that the maintenance is being done on it.
Yeah, going back to the technical side of the FAA rule is we have to follow the maintenance schedule of each one. So whether it's Skydio or DJI or whoever it is, we have to perform those maintenance as part of our
To stay up,
to stay up on that. So it's not a can we? It's
Well,
we
and
have to.
that's the challenge. That's because part of that is the manufacturer will say, well, you have to change the propellers every 100 hours. Well, how do you know when 100 hours is? How do you know how often you're flying? Is that going to be 100? So this is part of what I think we manage on the back end. And we've had customers have still liked to have the access to the footage, access to the feeds. So they get all of the benefits, the data and the features without the cost, liability, or headache.
Yep.
Being able to put that all in together. And I just think that's very powerful for half the cost of an on-site officer to be able to put the entire perimeter detection together in the drone. I think is a very powerful.
And our
business
software,
model.
the software we use tracks all that information. So it's not like we're writing down stuff. It's all digital. We know exactly when.
Right.
And we proactive that, right? It says, okay, they're averaging this much. Okay, we got to send out some new props. So we send out the props, have them replaced, and then on the schedule, it's not a manual write down process.
And Chuck, can you give us just a quick overview of the quoting process and how that works? How do we come up with, or how does a customer get a price for a system, and how does that work? What does that process look like?
Yeah, good question. Everybody's different. We need to know what your situation is, what your challenges are, maybe what you're trying to accomplish. You can go to our website and fill out a form if you want more information. What we'll do is we'll set up typically a video call screen share so we can see an aerial of your property, start to begin to understand what your challenges again are and your trouble spots, and then we can do a design for you, sort of a consultation on what your property's, areas that we got to look for and things that you want to accomplish, and then we can get you a quote pretty quick. And we can, if we decide to move forward, we can get these deployed really quick. So we're talking about the video monitoring side through the camera towers, virtual officer units that we have, Ryan. Those can be, 5 to 10 business days generally, and this one might even be as fast.
Well, that car dealership we talked about, they signed a contract on a Friday, and we had that installed the following Tuesday or Wednesday? Tuesday, and it was in the air and flying missions that night. So it was that quick. Speed, quality, and service is our thing, and that speed thing is, when people have issues and problems, but that's how quickly we can turn around and get something like this not only installed, but flying and up in the air and moving around. And I think we've had a couple incidents out there. Was a car accident we got some good overwatch on, and then I think the other night you were saying they had what they thought was a potential thief that was staged on the outside of the property.
Right. So, these dealerships butt right up to a highway, and one of the concerns was people parking off property near the highway or on the ramp and coming over the fence. And one of our pilots, while on the patrol, saw a car stop there. Knowing this information, didn't hesitate, called PD. PD came out there, the car took off and left.
Yep.
So, great possible prevention there. And then there was a crash on the street going right by there, and one of our pilot was made aware of that, launched, zoomed in, got the vehicle information and the vehicle license plates, was able to see all the activity that was happening because they moved onto property. So thus making it the company's business, and was able to get some really good video, and we were able to share with the business.
Yeah, and the installation of that is unique, right? Because we installed that on top of a building, right? And
The dock.
yeah, the dock. Yeah, so the drone can fly anywhere, right? And when we're talking about camera placement, you almost want those to be seen with the flashing lights and everything else as a visual deterrent. The drone dock, you almost don't want it to be seen. You want it to be in a secure area,
Right.
So no one's going to mess with it on top of a building, behind a fence, somewhere else, because the drone's going to open up, it's going to fly, and it's going to go do its thing. It's going to come back down. So power and internet, right? Those are the two things we absolutely have to have.
Yeah.
To get that to go, and that's why it's almost an easier installation because there's no setting of cameras, there's nothing out there. You get it out there, you put it all together, you get it wired, you plug it in, it's going up and it's running.
Yeah.
So it can be really, really fast in the right environment.
All right, good stuff. Well, I've got a couple questions in the chat here we'll get to. I know we're bumping up towards the end, so if there's any other outstanding questions here, throw them in the chat and we'll get to them. I also want to announce the winners of the drone prizes. I'll get to that here in just a second, but a couple good questions. One, any plans for East Coast locations? Great question, because we provide this nationwide. I think we're in all 50 states currently, remote guarding wise, minus Alaska.
Not Alaska.
Yeah.
One of these days.
One of these days.
But so we're nationwide there, so no worries. We've got reps all over the country and are able to handle whatever you need. Next question, and a good one as well, is can the system detect copper theft and catalytic converter theft at night? ARP is great for parking lots and different things. We also didn't get into a ton of the video analytics and the capabilities that the drone can have. I mean, it can fly along and detect people just like cameras can, which I think is very impressive because video analytics started with learning pixels, learning shapes, this pixel shape is a person. To do that with a moving scene, because traditionally cameras had to sit, learn a scene, you had to have some motion, even PTZs would pan, they'd have to sit there.
Still do.
So very impressive that the people detection and that type of thing. So that's one of the areas this kind of shines, and then the thermal camera kind of picking up on stuff like that, and kind of we'll continue to see that kind of improve, and something that we can show, maybe one of the features we want to highlight.
Just real quick
time.
on the copper theft, if somebody's stealing a spool of copper, if somebody's trying to pull it out of a building, good likelihood. Catalytic converters can be stolen under 2 minutes. So if by the time we get a drone over there, if they're stealing one catalytic converter, there still is no response time that can get that one stopped.
Other than the audio deter, I would say even the audio is.
If the drone can get over there within that short amount of time, where if they're flying over it and they see somebody rolling up underneath the car, they can do the audio and talk down. But
and a lot of that activity,
you have to be in the right spot at the right time.
And a lot of that activity about seeing it at night is using the thermal, the low light, and then like these dealerships we're at, they have pretty solid lighting in their parking lot. So this drone, even at night, it's able to key in on things.
Yep.
Couple other great questions. What happens if the internet connection fails mid-flight?
If the internet connection fails mid-flight, it is set up right now to hover for 10 seconds to see if it reestablishes, and then we'll automatically return back to the dock station.
Yeah. And we have some flexibility there. We can have it try and complete the mission on its own. We can have it automatically return. But that's our standard protocol.
Right.
Is give it a second. If it doesn't, it will automatically return back. We also create a geofence around a property so the drone never goes outside of that geofence. So flyaways are
mitigated.
Yeah.
Now you would lose the video feed, the live video feed from the camera in that situation, but the recording would, once a drone landed, you could upload the recording.
Still have that piece, yes. All right. Great questions. Keep them coming. I am going to jump in here, too, and pull a couple winners for the drone prizes. Again, we've got 2 drones to give away, one being a DJI Mini 3. And I will start with our first drone here, and that goes to Alicia Gaspar, Corporate Safety and Compliance Manager for Henson Adkins Transport. We've got a great drone here for Alicia. Thanks for joining. And then our grand prize, which is the DJI Mini, goes to Andrew Beckfield. He is the security manager for St. Luke's. Do you know Andrew?
I do.
No kidding.
I do.
He's the security manager for St. Luke's Health System.
Yes, he is.
You sound like you really want to say
inside
something,
baseball
but,
there.
I will bite
you've
my
censored
tongue.
yourself.
I am censoring myself.
Well, congrats, Andrew. That's a fantastic drone and a fun one to fly for sure. So I know we are, one last question here. Can drones patrol linear assets like pipelines and power lines? Absolutely. One of the things that we do, when we set up a site, is we do a 3D model of the property. So we really know, and you do a site assessment where you map out, and that's part of our waiver as well, is that we're mapping what obstacles are there. We're putting no-fly zones in certain areas and really making sure that we're not flying into the obstacles. If a pilot takes control of it and they want to fly over an area, we're just making sure that they can't fly into something that could potentially, am I off there?
No, you're 100% right. And then with like a linear item like that, you could even set it up with multiple docks but one drone, where you're kind of leapfrogging from dock to dock to cover extremely long distances in a reduced amount of time. Instead of having to go back to the beginning, you can leapfrog to different docks.
Yeah, and that goes into a whole other thing of solar-powered trailers, how do docks launch from solar power, because usually in pipelines and things like that, there's no AC power, so you got to pull power from the sun, and how does that work? But
and it can be done.
We've already got that one covered.
And that's it, yeah. If it's internet, and that's also kind of with our background with the mobile units and the solar trailers, is that is just right in our wheelhouse for things that we operate very well in areas that don't have power internet sources, and we can figure those pieces out. So those aren't traditionally bearers to doing anything like this. Another question: that the drone has obstacle avoidance system. Yes, there's capabilities within it. Can have its own. Although we've got there's a DJI Avata that I've flown into a lake on my own that sees, because you hear that and then you go, okay, obstacle is not a twig or a power line or something like that you see. So but we mitigate that because we're able to mask things out that pilots can't fly themselves into when you're left.
Yes, and they do have their own detect and avoid. But yes, no, that doesn't work for like a twig.
No.
Yeah.
3 millimeters, I think, is.
Yeah.
But that's why you avoid getting that close to them when you're flying remote.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great discussion. We didn't know. We kind of wanted to do this as an experiment of, we've talked about a lot of different things, and I think it's different to show it, live in action and really give people a first-person view or a ride-along to what our pilots see. Any closing thoughts, anything we left on the table?
Yeah, just reach out to us. Go to our website, see more about it. Fill out a form so that we can get in touch with you, and we'll have that site assessment for you and a quote, and obviously, and maybe a free demo or live demo if you'd like to as well.
Yeah, please follow us, YouTube. We've got great content. We're going to be putting a lot of stuff like this out, LinkedIn, YouTube. So please follow along. If anybody has any questions, needs any information, we love talking drones and security. So please feel free, connect with us, and we will keep the conversation going. But really appreciate everybody joining, and I think that's where we'll leave it. Any final words?
All good.
Appreciate everybody's help. Thanks again.
Thank you.